It's Thursday, the 20th of April 2023, and welcome to the Water Action Platform, where we proudly share stories from across the global water sector. Now, the Water Action Platform is open to all, free at the point of use, and we've been running for over 3 years, and our membership extends across 109 countries. Now, this broadcast will subsequently be made available online via various social media platforms, and our typical viewing figures across the last few months, across all those platforms, have been between 10,000 and 20,000 views every month. Now, none of that would have been possible without the support of our lovely sponsors who are shown here. And the more astute of you might already have noticed that since our last broadcast, I have fully embraced a completely new hairstyle, namely the shaven head look. Now, some of my cruel colleagues have suggested that I could rent out my forehead as a billboard for sponsors who want that extra bit of exposure. Who needs enemies when you have friends like them? Anyway, all that aside, this week we have a veritable smorgasbord of stories for you. From the Beacon project in Nepal, where a local water operator is able to tap into the expertise of a UK water company, to a new uplifting and inspirational film about how we can adapt to the changing climate and the coming energy transition. We will also hear from the Director of Policy at the National Infrastructure Commission, sharing what they've done around flood protection. And we have a new Both Sides Count debate section, this time on whether innovation really is better when you collaborate. However, let's start with Christine Colvin, Water Policy Lead at the World Wildlife Fund. I heard Christine speak at a conference recently, and she was just spectacular. She stole the show with her insights and knowledge. I subsequently discovered that Christine knew our very own Joe Burgess, who, I should point out, recently suggested that as it was Easter I could, and I quote directly, decorate my newly shaven head like an Easter egg. Anyway, despite that cruel comment from Joe, I encouraged the two of them to connect so that you too could hear the insights from Christine. Christine is now based in the UK but has worked for World Wildlife Fund globally for over 20 years. And two of her current focus areas are on the restoration of nature and using nature to help humanity survive the extreme weather that we will face as a result of climate change.
Hi, Joe. Yes, I'm Christine Colvin, and I'm the lead on water policy with WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature. We work globally in most countries around the world. I think we have a presence in about 90 countries and over 5 million supporters worldwide as well. My background is that I'm originally a hydrogeologist, so I came into the water cycle at the deepest and slowest part of it, and I've sort of gradually been working my way up to the surface, working through integrated water resource management, catchment management, and now fully into policy. I previously worked with the Rivers Trust and with WWF in South Africa as well. Obviously, working with the World Wildlife Fund, our focus is on nature and the role of nature in water and vice versa. So something that we're really focused on at the moment are nature-based solutions and how critical they're going to be for adaptation. So what we're really trying to do is link these two kind of big global issues together. One about restoring nature and how do we do that, and how do we do that fast enough to outpace the impacts of the climate crisis and use nature as our biggest ally in terms of adapting to the extremes of climate that we know we're going to experience. At WWF, we're working both at the basin scale and in countries, looking at how can we encourage governments, businesses, and local communities to accelerate the implementation of nature-based solutions. And around the world, we're finding that, nature seems like a real no-brainer. You won't have a carbon footprint, you have a much lower ecological footprint, but it's complicated, it takes time, it needs land often, and we're not used to investing in nature and nature's recovery in the same way as we're used to investing in a dam or a treatment plant. So we're working kind of at all those different levels, from the policy level to testing implementation, working with local communities and seeing how can this be implemented on the ground. The recent UN conference on water, of course, was at the UN headquarters in New York. And whilst the WWF team were there, we did a journey of water from the Catskills catchment, which is where most of New York's water comes from. And the city of New York invested in better land management in that area several decades ago in the 90s. And they saved themselves the initial $10 billion of OPEX costs, of capital costs for a new drinking water treatment plant. And of course, it's saving New Yorkers money every single year now, because the quality of water coming out of the Catskills is so much better with this better land management. And this has really been a great example that, again, the win-win. We've now got a beautiful area that New Yorkers also love to go to for the weekends, and their water quality is dramatically improved by the nature-based solutions and better land management there. Plus, aquaculture in the bay and on the coast has recovered because there are now fewer pollutants getting down into the marine environment as well. So that's been a huge success story, and it's really proven its worth for the long term. We developed a movie, Journey of Water. You don't have to spend an hour and a half. It's just 12 minutes long, and it'll take you from the source to sea. We did this with the Stockholm Water Institute as well, and look at where water comes from. And our tagline for that is, water doesn't come from a tap, water comes from nature. So the more we can rebuild nature into that journey of water, the better. The water sector has such an important role to play in terms of triggering faster rates of nature restoration worldwide. We know that we've seen the biggest decline and the biggest impacts on freshwater wildlife and freshwater ecosystems globally. So these are ecosystems that are hugely vulnerable, but are also going to be critical to our future adaptation. So I think the call to action for the water sector is to really kind of think green first. Think about the potential for implementing nature-based solutions first, and how could those be used best, so that we're getting that kind of triple delivery of less carbon, recovery of biodiversity, and better water resilience that's going to be future-proofed and really help us to adapt.
Christine's call to action there is an elegant echo of the takeaway message that Richard Wawe from Watercare in New Zealand gave us last month. Basically, put nature first. If the water sector puts nature first, everything else that we need ought to be taken care of. Now, Christine asked us to share some of the resources that she'd mentioned, and I'll include them in the membership email that I'll circulate after this broadcast. Our next story relates to the Beacon Project. So this is an inspiring project which has been developed by the charity WaterAid and with the water company Anglian Water. Now, the Beacon Project was established in 2017 to bring clean water, decent toilets and good hygiene to every person living in Lahan, a small town in the southeastern part of Nepal. The project is a partnership between a number of stakeholders, all striving to create a model of best practice for delivering water and sanitation and hygiene in Nepal. I recently spoke to Richard Boucher, Strategic Development Director at Anglian and Chair of their WaterAid Committee. I started by asking Richard what it is that they do.
So Anglian, along with our alliance partners, we've been raising money for WaterAid for tens of years. And what we were looking at is, how do we create a closer link with how the money is being spent? And probably about 6 years ago, we started to work very closely with WaterAid in Nepal. And we identified a city, a small city. It's about 90,000 people, Lahan, down in the southeast of Nepal, looking at how do we help gain access for the marginalized communities, access to safe water, as well as all the hygiene, sanitation, all the challenges that they have, and trying to improve. And the difference for this...
Well, I was about to say, was there any particular link that led you to Nepal, or was it that was an area that had a need and that was why you went there? Because there's been supporting winning city between Anglian and Nepal.
We'd been supporting Nepal indirectly by allocating some of the money that we raised. So as a community, we raise maybe 750 to £1 million a year as a company. Wow. And we wanted to, and that's from the strength of all our partner organizations, as well as employees, as well as some of our customers. And we wanted some of that to be directly linked to work, but also that as a company, we could draw on the strengths of our employees, the expertise we have, as well as the partners organization and the skills that they have to try and do something different.
Excellent. Now, and you're not just giving money, because you're doing something very different to traditional giving, I think. Can you just talk me through what that is?
Yeah, so we fund the program out in Nepal, so that's an element of giving money. But what we're also doing is employees as well as partner organizations are either donating equipment as well as expertise. So we're working with a number of organizations in Nepal, the Ministry of Water, the Nepal Water Supply Corporation, as well as the local municipality. And it's a collaborative effort between all of us, along with WaterAid Nepal, to and in a number of areas. So we're looking at how do we improve the water security. So we've been working with the corporation to improve their boreholes, to improve chlorination. We're also looking at how do we get safe, clean water. So in the town, they had a lot of leakage, intermittent water supply. So they were probably getting water 2 or 3 hours a day. It was not particularly good quality, a lot of leakage. And for those who know, if you get negative pressure in the main, it sucks everything in. So that's what they were getting in the water main. They weren't particularly testing for quality. So we started to bring appropriate standards, not necessarily the standards that we operate to here, but working with them to identify things. So over the last 5 years, we've improved the chlorination, we've improved the quality of the boreholes, we've sunk more boreholes, we've extended the network. We've also,
when you say we, because my understanding is that there's a sort of link, isn't there? There's a hard link that someone in Nepal can actually ring the technical expert in Anglian Water and say, I've got this problem, and can you help?
So the teams, so that's the strength. So the teams, we've got water quality, we've had leakage experts, we've had some of our drilling team, we've had people go out and train them. So there've been access to that technical expertise, but also out on the ground to help move them forward. So from simple things like trying to get them not to wear flip-flops when they're repairing leaks, to improve PPE, through to standards around chlorination, testing for water quality. And then,
how long have you been doing this?
So we've been doing this for about 5 years now.
Okay, so it's not. This isn't a new initiative. This is something where now relationships are really being built up. People say,
we had a lessons learned report written by somebody and researched by somebody in Nepal, and their comment was they'd not seen something like this before, because WaterAid and NGOs tend to have not necessarily the strongest reputation because they tend to fly in and fly out. Over a period of time, we've built trust with the government. So we have access to the government. We have access to, we brought the MD of the Water Supply Corporation over to the UK to experience some of the things. So we've built a relationship where they actually understand we're doing this because we want to help, not for any ulterior motive.
I think this is so... I mean, Big Brother is not a phrase, it's a George Orwellian sort of phrase of Big Brother, but you're genuinely being a big, loving brother to the utility in Nepal. Is what it feels like. I've got a problem. I can imagine someone on the ground going, I've got a problem. I don't quite know how to deal with it. And they can call upon the resources and the expertise that they just would have no usual ability to access. They can call upon that with an Anglian Water. It's such a wonderful major. How are people in Anglian Water finding it?
So the team
is it an annoyance? Oh my God, I've got another call from Nepal. Or
well, generally the calls are at about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, because they're 5 3/4 hours ahead. For some reason, it's 3/4 of an hour. But so they, we have early morning calls with them. There are teams, and they love doing it because they get the satisfaction of seeing progress, seeing things happen. So a team somebody went out and they helped install magnetic flow meters, so they can actually start to measure what's going on in the system. They see that they leave, things get finished. They're doing it to the right standards. So we're trying to improve the standards that they construct to, because there's always a tendency for shortcuts to be taken. So demonstrating that a borehole sunk properly lasts longer, the yield is better, the quality is better. But there's a lot of work that we're doing and supporting that's not just about water supply. It's about, and WaterAid are driving some of this in Nepal, which is the schools, community. So the Dalit community, the marginalized community, before we arrived, they didn't have access to pipe water because they didn't want to give it to them. We've managed to change that. We started to give them taps outside their houses. We've now moved, and the corporation are putting taps and access inside their houses, so they actually have tap supply. We've also been building community toilets because they've had no safe place to go to the loo. So there are community toilets that they then run. And what's happened is the municipality has come into this. We've got support from the mayor, and they've set up their own wash unit within the municipality. So we're supporting them. So the whole idea is this, why we call it the Beacon Project, is it wasn't only just to do Lahan, but we're able to, some of the learning. So when we've done leakage training, they brought people from across Nepal to be trained, and they're using the equipment in other places. So we've had equipment donated that they're then able to use. Borehole standards, they've started to apply that across other areas. We introduced labs. So a very simple lab, it's, just sort of a basic kitchen with a few testing kits, but they're starting to improve the quality and monitor it.
Brilliant.
Without our control, they've started to build more of these across Nepal. So things are replicating, and that's what we want.
Excellent. Well, Richard, thank you for telling me this story. What would your advice be to any other utility that maybe wants to follow this model?
I think the bits that I've learned from this process is it takes time. So it's not a thing that you can do in a year. It's not a thing that you can do in 2 years. So my advice would be, you've got to commit. We've had support, from the top down within the organization.
I was going to go, I'm sure that this is something Peter Simpson, your chief executive, if he owns it and he believes in it, then that cascades through the organization and people like you follow through. Richard, it's been wonderful to talk with you. Thank you very much for your time today. I wish you all the best.
You're welcome. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, the Beacon Project is supported and funded by Anglian Water and its supply chain partners. Now, if you want to know more or want to get involved directly, just follow the link here. Our next story is from the National Infrastructure Commission, the NIC. It's an advisory body that tells the English government what infrastructure is needed over the long term across a whole range of assets: transport, digital, water. Now, Margaret Read is the Director of Policy at the NIC, and here she is sharing more about what they've done around the topic of flooding and why this is important to water companies.
Margaret, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with me today. It's wonderful to connect with you. Now, I know that there's been a lot of really exciting things that the NIC has been doing, and it's across multiple areas, but it's the area around flooding in particular that we want to talk about today. Can you tell me what you've been doing?
Yeah, so we've been looking at surface water flooding. Surface water flooding is an area of flooding which hasn't been much looked at before. There were 325,000 properties in high-risk areas of surface water flooding in this country, and that number is growing due to climate change and impermeable surfaces. The number could double in the next 30 years.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it? And that's driven by climate change, the increase.
Yes, partly by climate change, but also increase in impermeable surfaces. So people tarmacking over their gardens or their front drives. Which I assume also gets compounded by the fact that we've got more people living in smaller areas as well. So you've got the whole population and how we live and climate change, a sort of perfect storm. Yeah. So what are the recommendations that have come out of that? So we recommended increased investment. £12 billion would reduce the number of properties at risk by 60%, which is a very cost beneficial investment. And we also recommended a hierarchy of solutions, starting with maintenance and optimisation of existing drainage, then above ground interventions such as sustainable urban drainage systems, and finally moving to below ground options like pipes and storage. Okay, and that 12 billion's over what sort of time period? That's over 30 years. Okay.
I can't do the sums in my head, but if I was clever enough, I'd be taking 12 billion, dividing it by 30, and then dividing it by the population of the UK. That's a sum.
It's about £2 on bills.
Oh, is it really? £2? Okay, well, there you go. That's the sum done. All right. And so what's the key new thing that's been done here?
We also made some recommendations on governance. Surface water flooding is a very local thing, but it's also a very complex risk with lots of different actors involved. So we recommended that local authorities should develop single joint plans with all the other interested bodies, and that they should get the funding to deliver them. And that's the new thing. Yeah,
well, absolutely. And of course, the thing that you sort of mentioned it at the beginning, but it's the surface water flooding. It's the poor sibling to the other types of flooding that we often talk about, be that sort of coastal or river, isn't it?
That's right.
Well, brilliant. Okay, so now this is your remit is for the English government, if I've got that right.
That's right. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And this is being watched by water utilities from 109. At the last count, we had Suriname joined us. So we're now at 109 countries. I think there's 192. So that just means I've got 81 more to get. No, 83 more to get. Anyway, there's 109 countries potentially watching this. How exportable is what you've been doing?
So we think water companies have got a really big role to play here, and that they need to invest not only in below ground assets like sewers, but also in above ground assets like the sustainable urban drainage systems that I was talking about earlier. And if they do that, they will also be investing in the local environment. So there's a lot of win-wins here for their water companies.
Yeah, it's about a holistic catchment management, isn't it? It's about looking at your catchment management, not just thinking about pouring more concrete to move the water from A to B, but managing the whole ecosystem. Margaret, it is wonderful to have someone who isn't a water industry person. Sorry, what I mean, you know, I'm not trying.
I know what you mean.
To have someone who's not a water industry person bring this sort of insight, because that perspective is hugely valuable. Thank you for taking the time to share with us this today. It's been wonderful speaking to you.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. So we now come to our debate segment, Both Sides Count, in which two senior people from the water sector present the case for or against a particular issue. This week, the debate is about collaboration, in particular innovation and collaboration. Is innovation really better when we collaborate? Or does working across multiple parties just slow things down, blunten the research objectives, create a decisions by committee environment? Well, our debaters this week are Melissa Meeker, Chief Executive at the Water Tower, arguing the case for collaboration, and Shafiq Adams, Executive Manager responsible for the water resources and ecosystems at the WRC, the Water Research Commission. Shafiq is a member of the Presidential Commission on Climate Change, and in his day job he oversees the WRC's R&D programme. Melissa, prior to joining the Water Tower, was the CEO for the Water Research Foundation based in the United States. As you listen to the debate, you too can join in. Click on the purple arrow to the right-hand side of your screen to open up the chat box and click on the poll. Interestingly, last month's debate on whether we should add chlorine to potable water networks split the audience exactly with half and half to the precise percentage voting for each side. The February debate on whether the water industry should be privatised was much more polarised, with almost 50% more people thinking it should be publicly owned. So I'm intrigued to see how you will vote on collaboration. So with that, let's hand over to Shafiq and Melissa.
Hi, my name is Melissa Meeker, and I'm the CEO of the Water Tower. I'm here to talk to you today about the benefits of collaboration. Collaboration is core to innovation. Bringing people together to focus on specific challenges is essential to foster innovation and creativity. The challenges we are facing in the water industry are so complex and interconnected, despite our often siloed organizations, which is exactly how we shouldn't be. By engaging with others, especially those with differing backgrounds and education and work experiences, we encourage more impactful problem solving and will ultimately develop solutions that have a greater chance of being successfully implemented.
Yes, while collaboration can be an effective way to find solutions, it's often not the best approach to take because when you do not have to collaborate, you can move faster, you can come to a conclusion and a solution faster, and you can, as they say, fail fast and fail forward. Often, when you do not have to collaborate, you're not exposed to groupthink where the most powerful or the most well-resourced voices gets the most attention. You are ultimately accountable for your own decision. In a collaborative environment, it's often not clear who is ultimately accountable for the solution, and this leads to unnecessary tensions and time constraints. And all these time-consuming activities do not take you often much closer to finding a solution.
Adding to my previous points, to truly collaborate on difficult issues, we have a responsibility to expand beyond our comfort zones to include diverse perspectives. Diversity in this case can mean a number of things. A proposed solution to help utilities detect leaks, developed by a team that has never interacted with a utility before, probably isn't going to go very far. Nor would an alternative to lead service line replacements that didn't involve stakeholders, the people that it's actually impacting. By collaborating and getting beyond the competition idea and our own comfort zones, we can effectively tackle challenges and move the industry forward.
When you are in island mode, you do not have to compromise your solution or position in favor of a win-win solution. Win-win approaches require all parties to be more flexible on their position during the process. It can thus weaken the solution substantially. For example, if two people have very different ideas about how to solve a problem, the resulting solution may not fully address either perspective. This can lead to suboptimal solution that doesn't fully address the underlying issue.
No matter the focus, by limiting our activities and conversations to our niche specialties and those that are closely around us, we are ultimately limiting our ability to innovate. It is essential to collaborate with others to truly address our industry's greatest challenges.
Collaboration can be time-consuming. It eats up resources that's not always useful for specific or local contexts, where perspectives of other role players need to be considered when action is urgently needed within that specific context.
So both sides are compelling. What did you think? And more importantly, what did they really think? Were they genuinely arguing the case that they fervently believe, or were they simply putting forward a case for the opposition? Well, here we have their honest responses.
I wholeheartedly stand by the arguments I've just given. Collaboration is what I have literally dedicated my career to. I can't think of a single good reason, while any person or company or organization would not take advantage of the opportunity to collaborate. Thanks. Have a great day.
So what's my actual view? Owing to the complexity and scale of our current challenges, we need to collaborate and we need to integrate solutions across disciplines and across stakeholders to meet these challenges head on and to achieve transformational change beyond only trying to cope with them as we do in most cases now.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Shafiq. If you want to be involved in a future Both Sides Count segment, just let me know. And finally, well, you may have seen the excellent 2020 Netflix film Brave Blue World. Well, the director of that film, Tim Neeves, recently approached me about their new film project. It's called Rare Earth, and it's going to focus on showing how the materials that we need for the transition to net zero, i.e. all the metals for batteries and things like that, can be made in a sustainable and equitable way. The idea is to have an uplifting, positive film which highlights the very best innovations. Now, not surprisingly, it will have all sorts of water angles because water is an integral part of the carbon net zero solution. So here's Tim sharing a little more about the project.
Tim, wonderful to be connected with you. So tell me about this new project, Rare Earth.
Hi, well, it's good to be with you. So yeah, Rare Earth is a film that's been on our hearts for the last couple of years during the kind of coming out of the pandemic. And it's a film that is really looking at our pathway towards net zero, looking about the kind of the minerals that we need to help us get there, how they're kind of being made accessible in a more sustainable and equitable way. So, we know we need to move beyond oil and gas. They are not just a finite resource, but they're also obviously the largest kind of contributor to climate change. And so kind of with this film, we're looking at how we can move beyond that. So looking at, one of the core areas obviously is critical minerals and rare earth metal productions, which are kind of vital for kind of this move towards electrification and low energy. But also looking for other ways, there are other innovators out there who are doing kind of things around waste and how to reduce the carbon footprint of our energy.
So it's going to be an uplifting, inspirational film rather than a "we're all going to die" type.
Absolutely. Do you know what? I'm done with those depressing films. There's so many out there that look at the problems of our world, but they don't find solutions that give us a reason to hope. And so this film is
reason to hope. That's what we want, reason to hope, something to believe that we can get ourselves out of. So how are you going to avoid there being loss of editorial control? How do you stop the big corporates sort of owning the agenda?
So we want to keep this as an independent film, an independent story. So we have a kind of a governing body who are helping us with the sort of the science. I'll be the first person to admit I'm not a scientist. I'm first and foremost a storyteller. So I need people around me to kind of help steer the story. So we are, finding the right stories. But we're looking for a kind of a broad group of organizations and corporates to give small amounts of money to help make this possible, whilst not kind of controlling the editorial.
And that'll be organizations from all around the world, and from investors to utilities to tech companies to corporates. It's a properly broad church. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's totally right.
I think that's a genius idea. And so big question. When can we expect to see this on the screens? You're doing the fundraise now, so what, filming later this year? And
so we're doing fundraise now, and our hope is to have that secured in this next kind of few months, so then we're able to kind of continue with the pre-production phase, which we're already kind of in at the moment, to sort of film through the autumn into the new year and have the film ready for next. In America they call it fall, we call it autumn over here in the UK.
Excellent. Well, wish you the very best. Can't wait to see it. We need more uplifting, inspirational stories about innovation. Well done.
Well, thank you very much.
If you'd like to be involved in Rare Earth, then let me know. As part of the fundraise process, they're inviting sponsors at $10,000 each. As it happens, Isle is going to be one of the sponsors. Now, aside from getting your logo on the film's credits, as a sponsor you can propose stories for inclusion, and best of all, I think, you'll be invited to the initial screening and have a digital copy which you can show privately within your organisation. It's a very worthy project, and I hope it captures your interest. Now with that, we come to the end of this week's broadcast. I once again thank all our contributors and sponsors. Joe mentioned last month that after the brilliant Both Sides Count debate on the merits or otherwise of chlorination, that on May the 4th there's going to be a 1 hour long extended debate on residual chlorine. The debate is being organised by the IWA, the IChemE and the RSC, and it'll involve Jan Vreeburg from KWR in the Netherlands and Jenny Colvin, former Chief Inspector for Drinking Water Inspectorate. I encourage you to consider attending. Next month's broadcast is on May the 25th at the usual times. Hope to see you there. Keep asking questions, keep sharing, and keep safe.